This week, what we're going to be talking about is asset location. So investments 101 is all about nailing down the allocation that you want. This could be, 75% US, 20% international, and then kind of segmenting from there. But what I found is that most people don't know 201, which is asset location. And asset location is all about putting the right assets in the right accounts to minimize taxes and maximize your after-tax yield. Investments are not just about growth, they're about the after-tax return that you get. Perfect example here, right, is you'll see people are like, oh my gosh, it's so great, I'm getting 4% on my cash. Yeah, but if you live in California, you're in the 37% bracket and you're in the 13.3% state bracket, you're not getting 4%. You're getting under 2% return versus somebody who might be in Texas. They might be in the 0% or 10 or 12% bracket. That 4% rate of return is vastly different. You need to understand how each account works. So let's start with tax-deferred accounts. So tax-deferred accounts are where you put money in pre-tax. Simple, right? Exactly how it sounds. This money then can be invested. And I say can because it doesn't automatically get invested, right? If you put money in a traditional IRA and you don't do anything with it, it's going to sit in cash. So you need to invest it. But this money can then be invested. It grows tax-deferred, which means you're not paying any capital gains taxes. You're not paying income or dividends or taxes on any of those. And then you're going to pay income taxes when you take that money out. Your income rate is typically the highest tax that you'll pay. Capital gains are typically lower. And obviously Roth is the lowest since it's tax-free. Some examples of tax-deferred accounts are traditional IRAs, traditional 401ks, SEP IRAs, cash balance plans. All of these are pre-tax accounts where you put money in before tax. So if you make $100,000, you put $5,000 in, you pay tax on $95,000 now, not $100,000. So it reduces taxable income today, grows tax deferred, and then you pay income taxes on the entire amount when you take it out. Tax-free accounts are Roth accounts, right? That's the other name for them. And this is where you put in post-tax dollars. So the example before, $100,000, you put $5,000 in. If you put $5,000 in a Roth account, you're still taxed on that $100,000. But this money then gets invested, it grows tax-free, and then it can be taken out tax-free and it doesn't count as income, right? So with those pre-tax accounts, let's say you have no income, you take out $50,000, you have some tax at 0, some at 10, some at 12, etc. Roth, if you take out $50,000, it does not count as income at all. So it's not pushing, being combined with Social Security or any other income, potentially from cash, bonds, etc. Because of this, tax-free accounts can be really, really impactful. Some examples are Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, HSAs when used correctly, mega backdoor Roth 401k. Those are typically the ones that you'll find. And now let's get in the last one. So the last one is taxable accounts. So this is your freedom account, your flexibility account. This is where you put in dollars post-tax still. So same as Roth, it does not change your tax situation at all as a deduction in the year you put it in. You can put in as much as you want. This money goes in, and then you pay taxes potentially on a yearly basis. So you would pay taxes on income if you're getting non-qualified dividends, maybe you're getting interest, then you'll pay capital gains at a short-term tax rate, which is same as your income if you sell. If you hold for greater than a year, then you pay long-term capital gains. Dividends are taxed. Everything is taxed as it is realized in that account. You're not getting any of those similar tax benefits to Roth or pre-tax, but you are getting the ability to have long-term capital gains, which long-term capital gains is taxed at 0, 15, or 20, which is lower than income taxes. If you make over 250, you'll also pay 3.8% net investment tax. The good thing about taxable accounts is that you can put in as much money as you want. You can take out the money whenever you want. You can invest in whatever you want, which is different than tax-deferred accounts. With tax-deferred and tax-free accounts, you have limits on how much you can put in. So IRAs are $7,000 if you're under the catch-up limit. 401ks are $23,500 if you're under age 50. So you have these limits, and then you typically can't take the money out easily. Pre-tax account, you cannot take those funds out before 59 and a half without penalties. There are a few exceptions. We're not going to spend too much time on that today. Roth accounts, nice thing about like a Roth IRA or backdoor Roth is you can take out the contributions you've put in at any time, but you can't take out the growth for longer except for, till 59 and a half, except for in a few different instances. Now that you understand these types of accounts, let's talk about asset location and how you can minimize taxes with your investments. Let's just think about the different types of investments first. first. So you have bonds, right? And so with bonds, when you're going to have just regular taxable bonds, you pay income tax if that is in a taxable account. For example, you hold 100,000 of bonds, they pay out 4%, $4,000 flows through to you, and you pay income taxes on that amount. Then if you own a traditional, let's say ETF, what's going to happen is those dividends, you're either going to have non-qualified, which are taxed at income rates, or you're going to have qualified, which are taxed at capital gains rates. Then you have REITs, which are basically no matter what going to be non-qualified. And so you're going to pay tax at the income rates. Now that you kind of understand the different types of investments, what they spit out and how they're taxed, we can start to think about where to place these. Since tax deferred accounts come out at income rates in the future, so think about this, right? If you have $100,000 in a 401k or an IRA today, and that grows to $1 million, you are then going to take that money out and it's going to fill up tax brackets. And in retirement, you're going to have pre-tax accounts and Social Security that do that. You're going to have Roth that doesn't count. And then you're going to have taxable that could spit off income and push you up, or it could be capital gains, which is kind of in a different tax world. So when you think about tax deferred accounts, there's a couple things that you'd want to have there. The first one is bonds. If taxable bonds, you're going to pay a drag on because the taxes flow through to you to taxable account, the better place to park those is in a tax deferred account. Why? Because you don't pay income taxes on a yearly basis. So that 100,000 bonds, 4%, 4,000 is truly $4,000 because there's no tax drag there. The other thing that you want to think about pre-tax accounts is you want the most conservative part of your portfolio there. When I tell people this, they oftentimes get confused because they're like, well, hey, if I'm not paying capital gains, why wouldn't I want, my highest growth assets in there? Because then I can sell. And there is an advantage that you can sell and do that. The disadvantage, though, is if your highest growth assets are in pre-tax, that's all going to come out at income tax rates in the future, and you are going to pay more tax. What is best in pre-tax accounts are bonds, could potentially be international investments with really high dividend yields. It could be REITs and really low growth parts of your portfolio. So if you were 100% zero equities to bonds investor, you don't really have a low growth part of your portfolio. So you really wouldn't be just saying like, let's just put bonds in pre-tax. But if you're 90-10, you're 80-20, et cetera, in a lot of instances, it makes sense to do all of those bonds in your pre-tax accounts. The one caveat here is if you have a short-term or midterm goal, right? If you have a short-term or midterm goal before retirement, you might want some of those fixed assets in your own name. So that way you have the liquidity and the ability to take from it. But in a perfect world, your bonds are in your pre-tax accounts to minimize that tax drag. And because you want the lowest growth part of your portfolio in pre-tax to minimize those income taxes in the future. If we go back to what we were talking about before, Roth accounts are entirely tax-free, right? You put money in, you put 100,000 in, that grows to $1 million. You avoided 900,000 of capital gains, and you get to take out that money without paying income taxes on it. When you think about that, I hope your mind instantly goes to, well, of course I'd want my highest growth assets in Roth. I don't pay capital gains. I can sell, I can rebalance, and it's not going to count as income in the future. So I want this account to be as big as I possibly can. And so sometimes I'm working with clients and they're like, I'll invest in international and some other areas because I don't really believe in them, but diversification matters. And so we say, great, if you really believe US is going to outperform, then let's put that in Roth. Let's focus more tilt to US. If you have individual stocks that you really believe in, anything that you think is going to get the highest growth are typically the things that you want to put in Roth. For me, I typically do not ever want to see bonds in Roth. And sometimes people will say, well, that's dumb because you get to minimize the income tax drag. Sure, but you're focusing on the lowest growth part of your portfolio. I would much rather have a little income tax drag in taxable than give up growth in tax-free. That's me personally. Most advisors I talk to feel the same. Obviously, if you're in retirement and you're very bond heavy, that might not be as possible. But remember, I work with very high income accumulators. This is typically a very easy thing for them to do. Hopefully all of that makes sense. I think the other things in Roth that you could do is REITs. I mean, a lot of people own REITs and they believe it's going to grow a lot. And, you get this added benefit of, not having that tax drag. Lastly, let's go into taxable. So as I mentioned before, with taxable, you pay taxes as they're realized. So when I think about a taxable account, I want it to be as tax efficient as possible. Tax efficient means, stocks that have low dividend yields. This could be, ETFs that are really sheltering and keeping the taxes inside, but it's typically not bonds, especially taxable bonds. It's typically not REITs. International is fine in there, but if you can park that a little bit more in pre-tax because they typically do have higher dividend yields, that might be better. At the end of the day, it really is about minimizing tax. In the taxable account, sure, match your time frame first. If you need money in the next 1 to 5 to 7 years, you might need bonds, you might need some things that, might add tax, but maybe in that situation, you're thinking about using munis. Because if you use, let's say you live in California and you use California munis, you get to avoid state and fed tax. And so that is a better use of using the taxable account, right? Taxable account matched with muni bonds is better than potentially a taxable account with any other type of bonds because of the after-tax yield that you're going to get because you don't have the tax drag there. Pre-tax accounts, we want bonds, things with non-qualified dividends, you're in your lowest growth assets. Roth, we want our highest growth assets, things that are going to just take off because we want to minimize and maximize after-tax yield. And then in taxable, we want to keep things out that are going to have a tax drag. So we don't really want REITs. We don't really want taxable bonds. We don't really want high dividend yielding investments. And when you start to match your portfolio this way, you really can maximize that after-tax amount. When we go back to asset allocation and say, hey, I want to be 90-10. And inside of that 90, I want to be 75% US and 25% international. Once you come up with your full portfolio, then you can go place those assets in the right accounts to help you minimize tax and grow your wealth in the best way possible. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and go follow my page for more personal finance content. And as always, if you have any thoughts, please leave it in the comments below, and I promise to get back to each individual comment. See you next week.